10 Tennessee cities are watching their housing markets collapse right now. Some were booming 6 months ago. Others were already struggling. But they're all falling for the same reason nobody's talking about. Starting with number 10, these are the Tennessee cities where the housing market is crashing fast. Number 10, Johnson City. Johnson City homes are going to pending in 22 days. That's the fastest velocity we'll see anything on this list. But despite that, the prices are falling, not rising. Home values are down 0.3% over the past year to an average of $282,216, with a median sale price of $307,300. Velocity usually accelerates in hot market when buyers compete for limited inventory. But Johnson City isn't hot, and inventory is building. 359 properties currently for sale, 86 new listings just in December. For a city of 71,000 people, that's substantial pressure. So why are homes moving faster than anywhere else while prices simultaneously decline? Because sellers aren't testing the market. They're not negotiating. They're taking whatever offer arrives first because they believe worse is coming. Think about what 22 days means. That's not even a full month. Most sellers spend that long just preparing their home for listing. When properties move that fast in a falling market with rising inventory, you're not seeing demand strength. You're seeing panic dressed up as velocity. Number 9. Clarksville. Clarksville has 1,140 properties for sale right now, 252 new listings in December alone. For context, that's one property for sale for approximately every 60 residents. And this shouldn't be happening. Clarksville exists almost entirely because of Fort Campbell, the third largest Army base by population in the United States. Home values average $316,126, with a median sale of $307,633, down just 0.4%. Military towns typically have the most predictable housing markets in America. Service members get relocated on known schedules. BAH rates are published annually. Demand follows consistent patterns. Military towns don't normally experience inventory surges like this. So where are all these properties coming from? Investors. Over the past few years, outside buyers purchased Clarksville properties expecting service members would rent them rather than live on base. The assumption was that active duty personnel would create endless rental demand. Except service members have options. And now investors are discovering that military towns have predictable markets precisely because they don't support speculation. The inventory surge isn't coming from service members leaving. It's coming from investors who bought properties for renters who never materialized. Number 8. Chattanooga. Chattanooga spent the last decade marketing itself as Gig City, offering the fastest municipal internet in the country and positioning itself as the perfect destination for remote workers and tech startups. It worked spectacularly. Young professionals fled expensive coastal cities for Chattanooga's combination of outdoor recreation, low cost of living, and gigabit internet. The city became a remote work success story. Until remote work started reversing. Major employers began requiring office returns. The tech sector contracted. Now the city has 913 properties for sale, with 177 new listings in December. Home values are down 1.1% to an average of $313,143, with a median sale of $332,250. Here's the problem with building your housing market on remote work. Remote work policies change faster than real estate markets can adapt. Someone who bought in Chattanooga in 2021 because they could work from anywhere is now facing return to office mandate in Atlanta or Nashville. What happens then? They're stuck with a house in a city they chose specifically because they didn't have to be there. And when that happens to enough people simultaneously, you get exactly what Chattanooga's experiencing. Number 7. Collierville. Collierville is the wealthiest city on this list with an average home value of $502,889. And 70.3% of sales are happening below list price. In a normal market, maybe 50 to 60% of sales happen below list price as buyers and sellers negotiate. But 70%? That means sellers aren't holding out for their number. They're accepting discounts to close deals. In the wealthiest city on this list, Collierville sits just outside Memphis, functioning as the affluent suburban refuge for people who want Memphis jobs without Memphis problems. It's consistently ranked among Tennessee's best places to live, down just 1%. the kind of place that should be completely insulated from regional housing issues. But it has 270 properties for sale, and homes are taking 56 days to go pending. So why would affluent sellers in an affluent suburb start accepting below-list offers at rates higher than anywhere else except the tourist towns? Because buyers have options they didn't have before. They're not desperate to get into Collierville anymore. And here's why that's happening. Collierville's entire value proposition is, we're the nice part of Memphis. But if Memphis continues declining, and it is, eventually there aren't enough high-paying Memphis jobs to support Collierville price points. And if crime or infrastructure issues from Memphis start creeping into surrounding areas, the insulation disappears completely. You're left paying $500,000 to live near a struggling city. Number 6. Jackson. Jackson and Collierville are at opposite ends of Tennessee's economic spectrum, but they're showing nearly identical distress patterns. Jackson's average home value is $215,979, less than half of Collierville's prices. It's a working-class regional hub in West Tennessee, midway between Memphis and Nashville. Manufacturing, healthcare, distribution. Nothing glamorous, but stable. Down 1.6%. Yet Jackson has 364 properties for sale, 64.8% of sales happening below list price, and homes taking 49 days to go pending. Nearly identical to what's happening in affluent Collierville. These cities are at opposite ends of the economic spectrum. Why would they show the same distress signals? Because the problem isn't local, it's regional. When wealthy suburbs and working-class cities both experience rising inventory and discount pressure, you're not looking at isolated housing issues. You're looking at structural regional failure that affects everyone regardless of income. Jackson represents the middle of Tennessee's housing crisis. Not expensive enough to attract serious investment speculation. Not cheap enough to appeal to bargain hunters. Just a steady, unremarkable side that affects working families who don't have the resources to relocate or absorb the loss. Number 5. Memphis. Memphis has an average home value of $141,666. It's the cheapest major city on this list, and it's still falling. Down 2.4% over the past year, with 2,698 properties for sale, 517 new listings in December, and 67.9% of sales below list price. Memphis has spent decades being affordable by default because demand remained weak. High crime, declining population, economic stagnation. The housing market stayed cheap because nobody particular wanted to live there. Except now it's getting cheaper. And here's what most housing analysts don't have language for. When a market is already at rock bottom and continues falling, what does that mean? Memphis isn't experiencing a crash because that implies there was a height to fall from. It's not a correction because there's nothing to correct toward. What's happening when a major American city can't stabilize its housing market at an average of $141,000? The market is discovering there might not be a price low enough to generate sustainable demand. Think about what that means. Memphis has made housing as affordable as structurally possible for a major metro, and it's still not enough. Because price is only one variable. If the jobs don't pay enough to support even cheap housing, affordability becomes meaningless. If crime makes people unwilling to live somewhere regardless of price, the market can't clear. If infrastructure is failing and schools are struggling, low prices don't affect stable long-term residents. Memphis isn't experiencing a housing market problem. It's experiencing fundamental questions about whether the city has a viable economic future. Number 4. Nashville. Nashville has 3,975 properties for sale right now. 725 new listings just in December. That's more inventory than any other city on this list by a substantial margin. This is Music City, the it city of the South, the place everyone's supposedly moving to escape California and New York. Average home value of $428,541. Median sale of $443,342. Strong numbers, 3 times Memphis prices. Down 2.1%. That sounds modest. Almost identical to Memphis's 2.4%. But this is Nashville, the city that did everything right. Nashville's supposed to be one of America's success stories, and inventory is building faster than demand can absorb it. When a supposedly hot market shows this kind of inventory surge while prices decline, it means the underlying story people believed is breaking. Nashville became expensive because everyone thought everyone else wanted to move there. But what happens when 3,975 sellers try to exit simultaneously? You discover that demand wasn't actually infinite. And suddenly, all those people who bought assuming Nashville would keep rising are competing to sell to a pool of buyers who are increasingly skeptical. Nashville's problem isn't that it's failing. It's that it succeeded too hard. The growth that made it attractive destroyed the affordability that drove the growth. Number 3. Sevierville. Sevierville has a permanent population of roughly 17,000 people and 946 properties currently for sale. That's approximately one listing for every 18 residents. Think about that ratio. That's not a housing market experiencing normal turnover. Sevierville sits at the base of the Smoky Mountains, part of the tourist corridor that includes Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg, serving 12 million annual visitors to Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Average home value of $402,677, down 3.8%. Over the past 5 years, investors bought Sevierville properties at record rates, converting them into short-term rentals. The pitch was compelling. Buy a cabin, rent it on Airbnb for $200 to $300 per night, collect income 200-plus days per year, and watch equity build. Until 76% of sales started happening below list price. 172 new listings just in December. Why would a tourist town with consistent visitor traffic suddenly see almost 1,000 properties listed for sale, with 3/4 selling at discounts? Because the short-term rental model only works when you're early. When one person buys a cabin and rents it to tourists, it's a small investment. When 1,000 people do it simultaneously, you've created oversupply that destroys the rental rates and property values the entire model depends on. Investors who bought in 2020 and 2021 assumed they could charge premium rates indefinitely. But when every cabin on the mountain becomes an Airbnb, guests have infinite options. Rental rates drop as properties compete for the same visitors. Occupancy falls as supply exceeds demand, and 946 sellers are now competing to exit a market that has almost no buyers except other speculators trying to time the bottom. Number 2. Pigeon Forge. Pigeon Forge is home to Dollywood, one of Tennessee's most visited attractions, and it's down 8.6%. Average home value of $407,391, with 228 properties for sale. That might sound better than Sevierville's 946, but Pigeon Forge is smaller, and the 8.6 price drop is accelerating, not stabilizing. If any tourist town in the Smokies should be able to stabilize its housing market, it's the one with Dolly Parton's name attached. The city built its entire economy around being the entertainment gateway to the Smokies. Dolly Parton's theme park brings millions of visitors annually. The economic impact seems stable and predictable. So why isn't it working? Because tourism doesn't translate to sustainable real estate value when every property becomes an investment vehicle. Dollywood brings visitors, but visitors don't buy houses. They rent for a few nights and leave. When investors bought Pigeon Forge properties, assuming Dollywood's visitor numbers would support endless rental income, they made a fundamental error. They treated a fixed pool of tourist spending as if it could support unlimited rental supply. It can't. When too many investors chase the same rental income from the same limited visitor pool, oversupply crashes the model. And having Dollywood doesn't matter because the anchor attraction can't expand fast enough to support the investment speculation that's happened around it. Pigeon Forge shows what happens when a town's identity becomes a liability. But at least Pigeon Forge has Dollywood. The number 1 city on the list has something worse. Number 1. Gatlinburg. Gatlinburg has a permanent population of 3,500 people, and it currently has 461 properties for sale. That's one property for sale for approximately every 7 people living there. Welcome to the gateway of America's most visited national park. Down 9.4%, the largest price decline of any city on this list. Average home value is $395,933. Median days to pending? 92 days, the slowest velocity on this entire list. Gatlinburg sits at the entrance to Great Smoky Mountains National Park, the most visited national park in the United States. Over 12 million annual visitors pass through annually. Peak tourist season sees the town swell to over 40,000 people, more than 10 times its permanent population. For years, that visitor traffic convinced investors that Gatlinburg real estate would generate unlimited returns through short-term rentals. But when properties do sell, it's after sitting on the market for 3 months with likely multiple price reductions. So how does the gateway to America's most visited national park end up with the worst housing crash in Tennessee? Because Gatlinburg doesn't function as a town anymore. It functions as a service station that investors turn into a speculative asset. And that creates a death spiral. When your town exists primarily to serve tourists, you attract two types of real estate buyers. Permanent residents who need affordable housing to work with the service jobs keeping the tourist economy running, and investment owners who need high property values and rental income to justify the purchase. Those two needs are incompatible. So investors buy properties and convert them to short-term rentals. Housing costs rise beyond what service workers can afford. Service workers leave or commute from farther away. The tourist experience degrades because there aren't enough workers to staff restaurants, shops, and attractions. Tourists notice. They leave reviews mentioning long wait times, closed businesses, poor service. Rental demand softens. Occupancy rates fall. Investors panic and try to sell. But who's buying? Not permanent residents. They were priced out years ago. Not new investors. The rental income math no longer works when 461 properties are competing for the same tourists. And everyone who bought in the last 3 years is discovering that simultaneously. If you're watching this from one of these cities, or you've seen this pattern somewhere else, drop a comment. What does it actually look like on the ground? And if you want more breakdowns of markets that are changing in ways the numbers barely capture, subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.